At Rubberband, we empower each other through positivity, kindness, and practical advice. Join a community of thousands of peers who understand the unique challenges you face. Rubberband. Company agnostic, low ego, high empathy, always supportive. And we are live. Welcome, listeners, to today's episode of the Rubberband podcast, where I am joined by special guest Lata Hamilton from Passion Pioneers for a Careers Chinwag. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I live and work on, the Wadawurrung and Dja Dja Wurrung people. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I would like to extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome, Lata.
Hi.
Hello, how you doing?
Hello. I'm really well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here today.
Oh, I'm so excited to catch up with you. You do such interesting work, and I can't wait to learn more about you and your journey and to hear about the work that you're doing. It's fabulous and it's inspiring, and I think there's a lot we'll be covering off today in terms of how the kind of work that you do impacts a lot of our audience who are talent acquisition and recruiters. So this is cool. This is something a bit different. So I'm excited. Thanks, Lata.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, we always start. Where are you joining us from today? Actually, where are you?
Sydney.
Yeah. Nice.
The Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
Oh, fantastic. And are you, which area of Sydney are you based?
Yeah, I live smack bang in the middle, right in the Sydney CBD.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, wowee. Hello.
Yeah. Actually, technically it's Millers Point. So it's like right on the edge, sort of where Wynyard and York Street is. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of feel like I'm straddling between two areas because it's sort of like the Sydney CBD is sort of that way, and then like all the historic area is sort of that way, and the beautiful harbour and Barangaroo Headland. And it's actually quite a quiet part of the city. So it's not as crazy as you probably thinking in your head, like, oh, she lives in the hustle and bustle.
I love that area, actually. And back in my Sydney days growing up, I grew up in Sydney, but I can remember Sydney when Darling Harbour opened, right? Like that whole area was, there wasn't much around. And then you go now with Barangaroo and, you know, it's just phenomenal around there. And I love the rocks. There's so much history and the markets are just fabulous. This vibrant, creative community that comes together on the weekends. Like I love where you are, so that you've chosen well.
Yeah. Well, it was funny actually because when we first moved here, it was 2019 and we were here for about 6 months and then COVID hit. So the city became a ghost town.
I can imagine.
Crazy. But because there are a lot of locals in sort of like Millers Point, like there was like a weekly market that we would go to, and like still some people like lived in the area and things. So it was really quiet, and it was probably a nice way to actually settle into the area.
Oh, fab. And where did you grow up, Lata? Where, tell me about your history and, all of those things that make up who you are today. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I was born in India, smack bang in the middle in Nagpur, and I was in an orphanage. So I was adopted by an Australian family when I was 2. And so I came to Australia and I didn't move to Sydney. I moved to Mount Gambier, which is in South Australia. My parents are actually from Geelong originally. So like we were based sort of around down there. And then I moved to Albury on the border between New South Wales and Victoria, moved there for 4 years. And then we moved to Sydney. And it was funny when we moved to Albury, the principal of the primary school that me and my sister went to. So my parents have 3 kids that are biological to them, and then they adopted me, and then a few years later they adopted another girl from the same orphanage.
Wow.
And when we were going, when my mum was like putting us into the school, the principal was like, oh, great, this brings our international multicultural population up to 4. And like 2 of those for me and my sister. And like we come from a white family, right? So like I don't even really consider myself like from like a person of color or a woman of color or somebody from an international multicultural background. But yeah, moving to Sydney was great because it was just was just that exposure, I think, as a 12-year-old, like to things like I'd never eaten sushi before, and like we were learning Japanese at school, and being able to just have the accessibility to shopping and movies and things. So I'm a city girl. I love Sydney so much. It's like I've lived in Perth as well, which Perth is an amazing city too. I was there for 8 months for work, but my heart always kind of comes back to Sydney. I just love it.
I know I've got a connection with Sydney as well. I think it's for me it's growing up there, but I'm in the regions now, but the regions are a lot different to when it was yourself growing up in Albury. When the way you describe it, yeah, Sydney's just it's just a wonderful place, and I think it's a place, if you live in Sydney, it never leaves you. There's a connection there, and for me, any time that I fly in and fly over the harbour, I just still to this day get goosebumps and feel a real connection to I think there's something very magical about that city. It lives and breathes, and you feel a part of it. I can really relate to that. What was your very first job, Lata?
So I worked in a local cafe. And so I was a barista, and I sold cakes and pies. And I also, I guess I worked there for like 6 years through high school and well into uni. So it was literally the longest workplace I've ever worked in. That first job. I've never worked somewhere probably even like longer than 2.5 years now. So that was my first role.
And do you think you learned, I guess reflecting on your career and what you're doing now, you mentioned it was the longest tenure. Like, what do you think you learned from that moment in your career where you were, making coffees and you were working as a barista and doing the, wonderful customer service? Do you ever reflect on, the skills that you gained from that part of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was writing my book, my editor was like, oh, I don't think like casual jobs in retail and hospitality really count as a career. And I'm like, they totally do. You're learning foundational skills and like how to operate in the world and in a workplace as a young person, and and also building that confidence to just, we were part of a franchise. So we actually had these standards that we had to maintain. We, had to greet customers within, 10 or 15 seconds or 30 seconds of them entering like the cafe. So like there were like quite strict rules about the quality of the customer service. And we were actually a really high performing cafe too. So we had won like the national award for that franchise and things. So we had to like maintain this level. So yeah, it was just kind of like thinking on your feet, talking with strangers, genuinely wanting to help people and serve people. So that was kind of like the big things that I learned throughout the career, and then like all throughout the role there. But it was interesting because at the very end, what I actually learned was how little loyalty counts. So I'd worked there for 6 years, and it's just a quick story, like I wasn't feeling great one day and I couldn't put on that front, like that sort of bubbly, chatty kind of front. And so my manager was like, like if you can't serve like that, then you should go home. So I was like, okay, fine. I'm happy to go home because I wasn't feeling well. And then I was in uni at the time, and then she didn't give me any more shifts for the rest of the summer.
Geez. Oh, what?
And like I'd worked there for 5 years by that stage. And then obviously there were other like high school students and things like that who were cheaper probably than paying me on my full adult rate. But I was just like, are you kidding me? Like really? And then I ended up going back, and it's probably one of the biggest regrets of my career because it was easy and it was close by and I was lazy and I knew it, right? It's like, fine, I'll go back. Like when she called me up out of the blue to give me more shifts when school had gone back. So I took it back, but I never felt the same. Like I never felt comfortable there again. And it's one of the biggest regrets in my life that I actually went back, even though it was only for a couple of months. I decided that I, was in my last year of uni. I wanted to start being paid for the skills that I'd built and what I had done and had. And so, yeah, I started to look for casual roles in advertising. But yeah, like it was such a great It sounds so weird, but it was such a great lesson early on in my career
Yeah.
because it served me well for the rest of my roles. Like I put myself first, and I really encourage my students, my community, my clients to do that too.
Yeah, I agree. I think we learn the most from those early roles, but quite often we don't reflect on those lessons. And I think it's a really important thing for us to do as we become more mature in our career, to remember those lessons that we learn and apply them into our current roles or into our career, and to continue that journey of learning, because we're human beings and we're running really fast. And I think sometimes we don't take that time to reflect. And if we do, we only reflect on what's happened in the immediate. It's a really interesting thing to look back at. When you were what were you studying at university?
Yeah, so I studied media and communications, which I thought it was going to be more like digital media, so like online and websites and radio and video and things. And there was that in it, but it was also a very political and journalism heavy degree, which I am not at all into. Like my parents were like, "How did you do a 4-year degree without ever reading the newspaper?" And I still don't read or watch the news. Like I kind of like keep myself very in a very positive mindset and mind frame. So like I'm aware of what's going on, like the high level things, but I don't deep dive and dive into. And I don't know if you remember, like a few years ago with the bushfires and things like that. And I was just like keeping myself up to date with all the news, and it really started to affect me like emotionally, and even sort of like through COVID and things like that. So I just don't really kind of like deep dive into the news. So the degree kind of was good because it taught me all of those sort of marketing and media and communications and advertising skills. But I was like never going to work in journalism, never going to work in the media. So that's why I went sort of down the advertising route instead. So I had a couple of like kind of casual roles in advertising. And then how I kind of started actually in corporate was I landed a marketing and sales graduate program with a fast moving consumer goods company. It was actually a beer company.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm not really a beer drinker, but if it was a wine one, I'd be really impressed. But
I did have a wine on, but I didn't work in that part. So
yeah. Oh, good. And then I suppose your career has naturally evolved into an area that we'll describe it as maybe careers or human resources and change and coaching. So tell me about how that's all come about, and walk me through your career prior to starting Passion Pioneers.
yeah, so I was sort of working in that marketing and sales graduate program, and sort of similar, like I had just sort of gone through a lot of personal challenges in my life, and so that's sort of where I found personal development. And then from there, I sort of learned neuro-linguistic programming, so NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which is the study of excellence in behavior, communication, and psychology, or your emotions. And why I learned it was because, consciously, I don't have any memories of the orphanage. I don't have any memories of like my birth parents, my birth mum. And like I did, like the person who was leading the training, they did this NLP intervention, which is like an activity, like an exercise with me when I went to this like class, like course on a weekend. And it's like my mind went back to being in the orphanage, like back to being a baby, like all alone, and then clearing any of those sort of thoughts like that. So I was like, I'm alone. There's nobody here to take care of me, blah, 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 blah. And then actually I was able to reframe all of those to be more along the lines of, I'm a beautiful, shining baby. Of course, there are people here taking care of me. How am I alive if not? And I'm strong and I'm capable and I'm successful in myself. And so that kind of being able to really unlock things at an unconscious level, those programs and those patterns, that was really what pulled me into that world of neurolinguistic programming and coaching. So I did a coaching certification, and that's when I started my own business, just as a kind of career coach. I did a bit of life coaching, but I just found that I was attracting a lot of clients, especially women who wanted to work on their career. So really career-minded young professional women who were either wanting to go for a promotion or a pay rise or a career change, or just step up and build confidence in their career. And that's what I sort of worked on the most in that. Then at the same time, what was happening was I was still working in marketing, and I was thinking like, well, what's my next role? What do I want to move to? And a colleague of mine who had worked in projects, she was like, oh, I think you'd be, because of my background in like meeting communications and marketing and advertising. She's like, I think you'd be really great in change management, organizational change management. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. Like if people, I think it's much more well known now, but this was sort of like back in say 2015, 2016. So I didn't really know what that was. And so, yeah, I kind of explored it and got my first role in change management. And she was absolutely right. Like I remember the second interview with the hiring manager who gave me my first change management role. And like, we've done the interview, and then she's like I could tell she was going to give me the job. Like I could tell.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you sure you want to hire me? Like, I don't have any experience in change management. And she's like, you do have experience in change management. You've been doing it, even if you weren't calling it that.
Mm.
And she was absolutely right. Like it was so funny because like she was trying to convince me to take that job, not me convincing her. But she was absolutely right. And if you do have any listeners who don't know what change management is, I love to define it really simply. It's just in an organization, moving people from doing things in one way to doing things in a new way. We do that through communications, training, and business readiness. And we do it in order to realize the business benefits of the change. So to get the return on investment and the experience and the benefits that we wanted from it. So it can be any kind of change. It can be like a new process or a new system or platform or application. It can be a new operating model or team structure. It can be a new like product. It can be like the move to remote work, the move back to the office, anything that's changing in a workplace. We can help people feel informed, inspired, confident, and ready with change management. So it was really interesting because the two things sort of came from really different areas, like the NLP and coaching and like that business, side hustle business that I started, and then the change management. But if you think about it, like it was actually doing the same thing, just in different arenas and with different people.
Yeah.
And so I merge those things together. I merge NLP and coaching into my change work because people's psychology is always the same. And I want to tap into people's hearts and minds and tap into people's emotions to help them understand and appreciate and come on board with change.
So I'm fascinated by NLP. So I just want to go into it a little bit deeper. And listeners, NLP will use as the abbreviation for neuro-linguistic programming. I think there are people who might be a little bit, afraid of NLP, right? Like there are, let's say they've watched the documentary on Nexium, for example, so there may be people that don't quite understand what NLP is that are listening today. So can you maybe bust that myth and tell us what it actually is? And then we'll talk about how the lessons from NLP and how you've brought that into, change management and consulting. I'd be really keen to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think NLP's probably gotten a bad rap because in the past, like it was used in a lot of like MLM, multi-level marketing, scammers and like salespeople and things like that. Like it was really, especially I think in maybe like the 90s and the early 2000s, like I'm probably a bit young, like I don't remember that stuff, but I think that was the history, where it's sort of used to, I guess, almost like manipulate people and things like that. But when you actually go and do NLP practitioner training, you learn how to actually work with people who are, and particularly coaching as well. You're working with people who are not in massive trauma. They're not, they're not really struggling. They're actually either average people or high performers who want to take things to the next level.
Mm.
So with NLP, we don't work with people who are like in deep addiction. We don't work with people who are, who are in massive trauma. Like we actually refer those people out to, the appropriate medical teams, like psychiatrists or psychologists. So what we're really focusing on is taking people and getting them to excellence, getting them to, high performance. And you can do really incredible things. So there's all these different tools and techniques that you learn that are really, like I mentioned, sort of like working at that unconscious level, and you're always doing it with the person. So it's always sort of like working with the person, helping them to uncover and unpack why they do what they do, what's holding them back from getting the goals or the changes that they want in their life. And, with my clients, it would be around their career. And then understanding those patterns and understanding those root causes, those memories, especially in our formative years, between the ages of 0 to 7, when essentially our mind is just like a sponge, like everything that's happening in the outside world is just going straight into our mind, and whether or not we believe it or even comprehend it, like we might be told something like you're a bad girl or you're a bad boy because you dropped a glass or something like that, but you then internalize that moment like it was such a traumatic or emotionally intensive moment for you, that you then internalize that and you're like, well, I'm not good enough, like I'm a bad person, like that's a big leap to make. Like you made a mistake, you dropped a cup, but then suddenly you're like, I'm a bad person, and you're carrying that with you for the rest of your life. So these unconscious patterns and habits and beliefs can actually be holding us back throughout our life if we don't reframe them and unpack them and heal them, essentially. So there's a really like intuitive lens when it comes to NLP and coaching. It's actually not super like process driven. Like you're really kind of feeling into it, and like it's so focused on the person or the people that you're trying to help. And that's what I love about it. It's so powerful because it really gets to the root cause. And I'm all for therapy, talk therapy and counseling. Like I've used counselors before, psychologists before. Like that's great. I want something that I think I find and experiences that I've seen people have is that they keep talking about it. They just keep going around on the story. And I'm like, we want to actually move people on. We want to actually move people to go, great, what can I do differently? How can I break that habit or pattern and then get to my goal and really set them up for success with their goal? So, yeah, it's incredible. Some of the tools and techniques you can, release limiting beliefs and limiting decisions. You can get clarity around problems and decisions. You can release some sort of like lighter addictions. And you can release sort of some of our major negative emotions like anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. And it's almost like, if you think about it, it's like resetting. It's like resetting you to a base so you can choose what you want to do moving forward. So it's like a lot of emotional intuitive work. And that's why I love it. And that's why I believe so strongly in it. And because the tools and techniques, like, when you learn it as a practitioner, you're learning how to do it with one person. But then when we're working in change, or when I'm working with groups or with students, like obviously we're doing it at a group level or at an organizational level, but how people think and feel is always the same. And that's, I think, where people are often missing in change management is that they take a really technical approach to it.
That's right.
Forgetting that we're living, breathing, feeling beings.
And what is it about, like, what, when we're talking change management, within organizations, and when we're talking about change in organizations, why do you think that brings that emotive reaction from employees? Like, how do you address that? Because I think every organisation that we've been in, there's always going to be change, and change is ongoing. And sometimes that can be big, and it can be things like restructures. Other times that can just be new tools and technology, right, that they have to learn that disrupts their normal day-to-day way of working. So, what is it that makes us have that reaction to change? And then how do you address that to bring people on that journey and move them forward if your approach is different to the technical change management that we also see that, sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, right?
Absolutely. I think it's really around, if you think about just change generally, whether it's in the personal life or in a workplace, people like things to be stable, because when things are stable, we can plan for the future. We know where our place is. We know where our position is and what we need to do. And there's a certain sense of power and authority and belonging and knowingness that happens when things are stable and the same. So, excuse me. So when obviously when change comes knocking on our door, which is inevitable, we get very scared of what we're going to lose and how we're going to appear if we can't change, if we can't keep up, and particularly what we're going to lose. So like something as simple as, we're changing from this old system to this new system. Super, like you think, okay, it's super simple change. Like both systems are really intuitive. Often they're not, but both systems should be really intuitive and user-friendly. But you might have people who they literally built their entire role and career being an expert in the old system. Or they like to be able to personalize and customize that old system. And in the new system, maybe they can't personalize and customize. Or maybe they're doing the dodgy McDodge in the background and doing things that they're not meant to do in the old system, and the new system will prevent them from being able to do those sneaky workarounds. So like there's so much that we can lose, and that's why like it actually really triggers our survival instinct, our fight, flight, freeze response, because it's like, where am I going to land? And humans are social beings. We want to be able to connect and belong in our social setting, and change throws up the opportunity for us to be exposed and for us to potentially not look good or to potentially even lose our roles. And so often a change that has nothing to do with jobs, nothing to do with job security. We're not changing roles. We're not changing, it's not a restructure or operating model change. There's no redundancies or anything like that. But the jump that people make in their head is that they're going to lose their role around it. And If you think about it, that's their livelihood. That's what puts food on the table. That's what puts a roof over their head. That's what's feeding their families, supporting their families or themselves. And that's where people's mind jumps, even if it's like got nothing to do with that at all. So knowing that, it's like instead of just taking a technical approach to change management, so like, how are we going to communicate this to our people? Our message from the CEO, let's blast out to all staff this message from the CEO, this email that probably half the people aren't going to read. Instead, it's like, how can we inspire and empower people? How can we, like one of the activities and tools that I use is one called benefits mapping. And the way that I do that is with a neurolinguistic programming NLP technique called chunking up, which simply means that at a base level, so like when you chunk down, when you go into more detail and you go lower level, it creates disagreement and it creates like variances of opinions and preferences. When you chunk up and you go more higher level, you get agreement, people feel together, and you get more alignment. So we chunk up to help get to those benefits, those business benefits, and then we use those business benefits in all of our key messages and our narrative and our communications, and then we also kind of like the way that I teach change is how to create really exciting and because I got that marketing and advertising background, how to almost make it like an advertising campaign rather than just a boring change management approach.
Right? Get the buy-in, right? Advertising buy-in. There we go. Like it makes sense for sure. And look, I just want to say congratulations on Passion Pioneers and the work that you're doing. I mean, it's you've had the business for a decade, which is incredibly exciting. I know it's gone through various different, stages. But tell the audience, when they should reach out to you in order to engage with Passion Pioneers, and where your core specialization is. So if someone is within an organization, whether that's in the recruitment industry or human resources, when should they reach out to Passion Powers and Passion Pioneers, and why?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I kind of work across two streams. So I do consult with my own clients. So if your organization, whether you're a recruitment agency or an organization, if you're going through organizational change and you really want that support, sort of like the way that I work with my clients is I'll often showcase best practice and sort of come in and do like set it up for success. But then I love to also teach capability and sort of leave the capability in the organization. So I work a little bit differently, I think, to a lot of consultants. Like my big passion is sort of democratizing change management and getting it into the hands of as many people and as many leaders as possible.
Amazing.
So that's kind of the consulting side. But then if you yourself are like interested in the career change to change management, or you want to bring change leadership skills into your leadership or into the work that you're doing, then my Leading Successful Change program is definitely the best place to do that, because I teach how to do change management end to end, like the delivery of change management end to end, which is sort of like how you would do it for a project if you were supporting a project. But then because I build in all of those neurolinguistic programming, coaching tools and techniques along the way, like that's what takes it to the next level. So I've had like really experienced change managers join my program and they're like, this is not a beginner's course. Like this is such an advanced level course because the way that I teach and approach change is so different. And I think that HR plays such an important role in organizations. Like often they are at the front line with people. And sadly, I think they often get bogged down in that administrative side. Whereas you have the opportunity to be so strategic. And sometimes HR teams are tasked with having to lead big changes or having to support big changes, but they're not given the tools and resources and the capability to actually do that effectively and to also support themselves through the change. So I always sort of like to say that when you're leading change, you're also receiving change at the same time. So it's also about like kind of protecting yourself and armoring yourself with the skills and with the strength and with the community to actually be able to be that leader of change. So yeah, and then like change management does often report into a HR function within an organization. And then on the recruitment side, like I've got such fantastic relationships with so many incredible recruiters because change management sits in like the projects and transformation space. There is a lot of more sort of contingent contract work and things like that. So I've got really great relationships with recruiters and I love recruiters. I think they are the best kept secret when it comes to change management. And I'm always promoting them to like students and my community and my network and resharing their roles on LinkedIn and things like that. But, you know, even for recruiters, I think we do a lot of like, not that I'm a recruiter, but I think I see a lot of recruiters really support their clients and really support the talent. And it's like, who's supporting them? And when change is going on in their organization, like, is there a change manager who's helping to make sure that everybody understands what's going on? So again, it's a little bit of that self-care, I think, sometimes that can come into, you know, to your listeners and the people, like it's such a people-focused role in recruitment and HR, and it's like making sure that you're supported too.
And look, the recruitment industry at the moment is going through the biggest change that we've ever seen with AI, for example. Like our ways of working are just changing daily, right? Like the technology is progressing that far. So, you know, change management is incredibly important to our industry right now. And how to manage and navigate through that, because a lot of people, you know, there are even people who are saying they're afraid that they will lose their job, that the role of a recruiter won't even exist in a few years, right? Like it can be, the emotive reaction can be that extreme in our industry. I don't agree with how people, but it's not about agreeing, right? It's how people are feeling, and it's stirring up that emotion for people. So, thank you so much for joining today, Lata. This has been such an incredibly fascinating conversation that I selfishly want to continue talking, but I just want to also congratulate you on your book. So if you want to just give your book a bit of a plug and tell us about that. And
yeah, sure. So in November of 2024, I wrote and launched my first ever book. It's called Pioneer Your Career Change, and it was a really nice, almost like full circle back to the early stages of my business when I was sort of doing more career coaching. So it is really focused around how to actually change careers, and a big reason, like exactly what you said, a big reason as to why I wanted to write it and why I think it was so timely was because people's roles are going to be impacted, and we need to start empowering our people and our teams and ourselves around how we can take our transferable skills and move into any role that we want to in the future, some of which haven't even been created yet.
Yeah.
So instead of being on that back foot of change, technology, AI, automation, instead it's like, how can we create a level of comfort in changing ourselves and a really, really owning and really standing in our own true strength around our skills and the value that we bring to the table, and then expanding and exploring our ideas of what work could look like in the future, how we might structure the way that we work, but then also what those skills roles, workplaces, and ways of working will be in the future. So it's Pioneer Your Career Change. You can find it on Amazon and Audible. So it's available in print, ebook, and audiobook. But yeah, and also just come follow me on LinkedIn is what I'd say. Like I just post so much stuff about sort of career and change leadership and just my food and
Oh, absolutely. And that's how I know you, right? Like your content is so engaging, and it's how we connected. So everyone out there, follow Lata on LinkedIn, and you'll see all the information about the book and the coaching on there as well. So that probably is the best bet. Lata, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you today. Thank you so much for joining, and have an amazing weekend ahead.
Thank you so much.